Broadcasting to you from the beautiful Pacific Northwest. I'm your host, Brad Johnson. Welcome to The Theory of Wine. In today's podcast, we talk with a real grape killer, Washington winemaker Chris Gorman of Gorman Winery, and we chat with Vancouver BC wine writer Leenn Frose of thevineyardbirder.com. We're going to talk about Washington wines, a big winery move, and meet a wine writer. It's going to be awesome. Stick around. Support for this podcast comes from the new documentary film Wine Diamonds, Uncorking America's Heartland, streaming now at winediamondsfilm.com and from wineryboost.com, influence marketing for the wine industry. My guest, Chris Gorman, is the owner and winemaker of Gorman Winery, a super premium winery located in Woodinville, Washington. Chris began his wine industry career after university in 1991, working for an Italian wine importer, and dug deep into the wine for the next decade. His winemaking career began by producing small batch wines using stolen fruit from many of Washington's best vineyards. In 2002, Gorman Winery went commercial. Today, it produces some of the world's best wines, consistently earning 90-plus ratings by Wine Advocate, Wine Spectator, Wine Enthusiast. Frankly, his wines are just incredible. Chris Gorman, welcome to The Theory of Wine.
Thanks for having me.
Full disclosure here, my son Logan is your cellar master.
Yep.
And I couldn't be happier that he is.
He's doing a great job.
Yeah, he's found a very fortunate home, and you guys are making some crazy great wine here. So I'm curious how you found your way into the world of wine.
I literally fell into it. I'd not ever even bought a bottle of wine before I joined the wine business. The wine business was a vehicle to get me down from Bellingham, Washington, down to Seattle. I was in a band in Bellingham. We tried to get everybody down to Seattle so we could play down here. This is pre-grunge by about 3 days.
Okay.
It was almost immediately before Smells Like Teen Spirit came out. So I took a job working for a small distributor. The only job available was the production side, the warehouse job. So I drove a forklift, swept the floors, delivered, did some sales. It's exactly what I'm doing today. So I'm very, I feel at home. As my first job has not really changed much in the wine business. And I grew into the sales side. You know, I climbed the ladder where I changed companies. I became a sales manager. I became a buyer for a great company locally, and they used to send me all around the country and the world buying wines from great winemakers. So kind of fell in love with the whole process for sure. And then I decided to, do it on my own.
So this seems like the great way to begin. Many people don't begin that process that way. They usually begin in the garage, start learning how to make wine, and then they start create a winery. But learning how to do wine business from the ground up, from a wholesaler or distributor side, seems like a smart way to get into the business. So,
invaluable, actually. I mean, the ability to taste so many wines, international wines too.
Right.
Like I knew very little bit about Washington wines when I started a Washington winery. I mean, I was more averse, and I could still fall into that category. A little more expertise in Italian wines and Spanish wines, German wines. I love them. I love all wines.
So is that what you shoot for, like stylistically going down?
No, quite the opposite. I embrace Washington for what it is. I mean, we are in a desert climate, and we make very delicious, generous fruit, and it's a different atmosphere than France and Germany and Italy, and I don't think you can pretend to be somebody else. I mean, the Monkees could never be the Beatles.
Absolutely.
So, not that we're the Monkees up here in Washington State, but it is definitely you work with what you got, and we have delicious, amazing fruit up here. But I think we're more akin to maybe parts of Spain and parts of Australia in terms of style and being that kind of generous version of wine.
So tell me about your first batch of wine you made.
Very first batch was beer, actually. So I started making beer, loved the whole fermentation thing. Mm-hmm. This is late 90s, probably mid-90s, late 90s. And I was representing people like Dunham Cellars in Walla Walla, Matthews Cellars, Lake Hull is still one of my favorite wineries in the world. And I would, when I say stolen fruit in some of our bios, I would help them out. They would give me 100 pounds of must. And The first batch actually turned out pretty well. I mean, I'd made small batches of like Yakima Valley Syrah. I made Ciel de Cheval Cabernet. I made Seven Hills Cabernet. I made Pepperbridge Cabernet, but nothing more than 100, 200 pounds. But I cut my teeth on some really, really good fruit in Washington State. And then the first real commitment to making wine was at the time I was representing Eric Dunham, and I got about 2 tons of Pepperbridge Cabernet from him, and I brought it into my garage in West Seattle, and I made 5 barrels of wine, and it turned out fantastic. And then again, as an amateur, you have 120 cases of wine. What do? You got to go commercial, and so I never really even planned to go commercial as a winemaker. It was just something I did, and then I made too much, and I thought, you get an Excel spreadsheet going, and you're like, well, I could make this work. I'll just make 2 tons a year. This last year we did like about 130 tons, so it does grow.
So your commercial operation began in 2002.
2002 is the first real year. Prior to that, I did make a ton here, 2 tons there. So I was a very advanced amateur because I had great fruit and I had great help, and that's really where it's at. I mean, you can't be a good winemaker without a good Rolodex, and you have to be able to call people smarter than you. Right. And it's always been the case for me.
Who's your mentor?
Well, in Washington, I love Lake Cole. Back in the day, I could talk to Eric Dunham, the people in Oregon that I represented. Steve Dorner out of Christum is one of my favorite winemakers in the world. But I had a pretty good list of winemakers to call. I mean, Domenico Clerico making Barolos, Paulo Scavino. I mean, these are people that I used to drive around in a car with and chat them up. I mean, a lot of them don't speak English, but I would learn as much as I could about winemaking, because as a sales rep, they'll tell you anything. Right. As a winemaker, they maybe wouldn't tell me anything right now, but I learned quite a lot just by osmosis.
So we're sitting in your tasting room here in, one of your tasting rooms. We're in the warehouse district in Woodinville. Is this the first location you've had as a commercial winemaker? Yeah, we've been here since 2006. We built the room out in 2006, but we never opened it up as a tasting room until about 2016. Okay. We waited about 10 years because we had experienced pretty good success with relatively small amounts of wine. For years I only made 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 cases. We crept up slowly, and but everything sold out, so I never needed a tasting room. And now that we're making 8,000 to 9,000 cases a year, I think you have to have a tasting room, and that is what Woodinville is now. It's kind of a mini mall of tasting rooms where there's maybe 40, 50 production wineries, but there's 120 tasting rooms. So people come from all around the state to open up a tasting room here. So it is a very retail-heavy city. And I dragged my feet for years. Our first tasting room was 2012, which is, I'm a little slow on the uptake. I probably should have done it since 2006, and we'd be probably in a different position right now. But the retail side is, love it or leave it. It's super important to wineries. So, speaking of customers, we have most wineries have wine clubs. We do. If somebody was interested in your wine club, it's pretty easy to get connected with you. Yeah, absolutely. We have 3 wine clubs. One of them is closed right now. It's our more premium club called the Fog, but keep on asking because openings happen. And then we have the Army, which is kind of a maintenance club where you can get kind of our mainstay core wines throughout the year. And that's really, in my opinion, the important one, because we want to keep our roots. It's what we started with. It's the wines we made in 2002 and 2003, and it keeps us sustainable. It's what we are. And then we have a Chardonnay club. I think we have the only Chardonnay club in Washington, just because we make 6 to 7 Chardonnays a year. Oh wow, no kidding. It's crazy. That's awesome. Yeah, it's the only white wine we make. We love Chard. Okay. Yeah. So I'm thinking about philosophy of winemaking. That's probably the fundamental thing that drives us as winemakers, how we express our craft, our art. So what's your philosophy of winemaking? Well, philosophy in Washington State has mainly been ingredients, always good ingredients. Most certainly for us, it's been Red Mountain in terms of red grapes. We only pull from basically 2 areas. We're almost entirely Red Mountain, Cabernet, and Syrah, with a little mix of, a little Merlot, a little Mourvedre. And then we pull a little bit from a cooler site, the most famous cool site in Yakima, which is Boucher Vineyard. And we do Syrah, Grenache, a little bit of Mourvedre from there too.
Just good ingredients. These are hardy grapes. Red Mountain for sure is, almost monolithic in size. And so our style, it tends to be a little more concentrated, a little more generous. Red Mountain is dark, it's tannic, it's delicious, bold. And you can't fight it, so we don't. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. And on the other side of the fence, we do a lot of Chardonnay from a lot of the old vines in Washington State. So we do Celilo, we've done Kestrels, old vines, the oldest vines in the state. We do. We're one of the few wineries that are allowed to do Cold Creek Chardonnay. So that's a Chateau Ste. Michelle property, and they're kind enough to give us a couple tons a year.
Nice.
And we do. I don't think I mentioned Connerly also. So another great kind of cultish vineyard in Washington.
So these grapes are growing. A lot of people don't know much. If we're not in Washington and visited the area, you maybe don't realize that it's not all Seattle. It's on this side of the mountains, on the west side of the Cascades.
Nothing over here. Yeah. So there's not a good grape within 150 miles of us.
Okay.
I don't want to say good grape. There are some in the Puget Sound area, and there's pockets of Pinot Noir, I guess, in and around the area. But for the most part, you got to go over the mountains, past the ski slopes into the desert area of Washington State, where primarily all the grapes are, and that's where all of our stuff is. So, Red Mountain, 200 miles away, and we get the grapes trucked in every harvest. So we pull in roughly 120, 130 tons a year. It comes same day that it's picked in a semi-truck. So we get about 6-7 semi-trucks a year filled with grapes.
And I was here for one day during the crush, and I've been around the industry for a while, and these grapes are so beautiful. They were like somebody went in the vineyard and hand selected each cluster, made sure there was no leaves in the cluster, and filled up bins and bins and bins.
Yeah, well, Red Mountain is super important right now, and all the farmers know it, and they got their game on. Yeah. Everybody's producing great fruit, and we pull from a majority of the vineyards up there, but they're all the ones we pull from are great. We've been pulling from most of them since 2002, 2003. New batches come on. Quintessence, Sobolesco, Shaw have been newer for us, but we're still 6 years into those, and fantastic farming.
So looking back at when you began in 2002 and to 18 today, so how does your operation in terms of your fundamentals have changed, or have they changed?
Oh, it's changed dramatically. I think for the first 10 years it was just me, and so one person can realistically, I feel, do 3,000-4,000 cases a year by themselves. If you have a forklift, if you've got some good machinery, if you've got some good volunteer help, really. volunteers kind of help the Woodinville wine scene quite a bit. But, as soon as you hit somewhere around 100 tons, it's backbreaking. And, as I approach the age of 50, the thought of doing it myself is just ridiculous. So we have a crew of 4 guys on the production side. We've got a crew of 2 salespeople, delivery, because we control our own distribution in Washington State. And then there's another 10 people in all of our tasting rooms. And that's to cover 2 tasting rooms. Next year, when we move, we'll have a 3rd tasting room. So our employees will grow, and it's who knew? I've turned into kind of a manager of people rather than a manager of yeast. Yeah.
So it's a perfect segue.
Yeah.
Okay, there's change afoot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us about what's happening.
Well, Maltby, a little city, if it's even a city, just north of us. Tiny little hobble. There's no wineries there right now, but this time next year we'll have 5 wineries and a distillery moving into a new production facility. So the first time in my life I'll ever work in a facility that's built for wine. Slope floors, high ceilings, temperature control, 180-degree water at 10 gallons a minute, all the geeky things that winemakers want. We'll have new tanks and electric forklifts, drainage. There's a vault for kind of a water reservoir vault for lees and things like that. So, it'll be a fantastic kind of state-of-the-art complex. And a few of the good names out of Woodinville are picking up and moving there. It's kind of interesting.
Oh, I can't wait to see your facility.
I can't wait to see it. Yeah.
So I'm going to rewind just a second.
Sure.
You mentioned lees, and I know there's a lot of us that understand what this means. This inside wine world here. So tell us what lees are.
Lees are kind of the dead yeast cells that you need yeast. We just kind of manage it throughout the year, and it drops out after it dies, and it sinks to the bottom of the barrel. And sometimes you can leave it in, sometimes you stir it in for body, sometimes you rack off the wine to keep it clean. So it's a little bit of the lifeblood of the wine. Okay, and it certainly was the beginning of the wine. Wine is just grape juice turned into alcohol. So and you need yeast to do it.
So your Chardonnays, do you do a sur lie treatment on them?
We do, depending on which wine it is. Most of our Chardonnays spend about 10 months in barrel, and we'll kind of hold off sulfuring a wine as long as we can stir it, and sometimes we'll stir it up to 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Okay. Depending on the wine, if it can hold it. Sometimes they get oxidized, so you got to sulfur it.
So what does that do when you leave the yeast in the barrel and stir it up periodically?
It kind of builds kind of a mid-palate, adds a little flavor to it. It's a structural thing, but it can add a little kind of that breadiness and just kind of mid-palate, kind of earthiness. And it helps keep it alive, really. I mean, you can, as long as you do that, you don't have to add sulfur, or you can slow down the addition of sulfur to it. And a lot of our Chardonnays can last up to 3, 4, 5 months without the addition of sulfur. So traditionally, when they're in the bottle, the Ashen wines, which is our Chardonnay project, have a low total sulfur to it. Yeah. Okay.
So you just mentioned labels. How many labels do you have right now for folks that are wanting to find your wines? What labels would you look for?
Mainly, you look for Gorman Winery.
Gotcha.
Gorman Winery is our core. It's what we do. It's what we're known for. It's my last name. But Ashen Cellars is our Chardonnay project. Okay. It's a little more serious Chardonnay, kind of artisan chard from some of the more important vineyards in Washington State. And in theory, we're kind of a third label on top of that, which is Old Scratch Cellars. Even though it's still under the Gorman name, we're going to separate it here pretty soon. And this tasting room will actually turn into Old Scratch Cellars. Okay. And we'll do I don't want to call it our lower tier wines because it's a lot of times it's the same fruit that has made it into more of our our $50, $60 wines. It tends to be the more used barrels, press wines, which sometimes feel a little different from the free runs. So it's a small separation in the styles of wines, even though it's the same grapes. But you can get a lot of different colors out of one grape, one batch of grapes.
So the Washington wine world has really gotten a lot of attention the last, it just keeps getting better and better. When we lived here back in 2000, I think there were just a handful of wineries in the Woodinville area. Yeah. And it's just kind of blowing up. So what's your prognosis of the industry in Washington? I mean,
when will it stop?
Well, yeah, there's climate change happening, and if you take that, and it's like, okay, it's getting hotter and more flammable than California. Washington wines are rocking. Yeah. So what's your thoughts?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we're making in a hot area anyways, and we've had some warm vintages, but we've also, 2010 through 2011 were the coldest vintages we've had on record, as long as I've been making wine, and I didn't enjoy them. So bring on the heat, in my opinion. I like what's happened 12, 13 until now. I would say 18 was probably the best year I've seen, and that's not just hyperbole. It really was a fantastic vintage, and most of the winemakers are tending to agree that this is really kind of a special year that we just had. But I enjoy a warm vintage. That's not for everybody, but I do feel Washington, our style does kind of excel in a year where there's certain ripeness, not over ripeness, but it's nice. And I think 18 was a perfect year for this, where you get ripe fruit later in the harvest. Nobody wants 25 bricks in August, right? But you want, if you can hit 25, 26 bricks maybe in the end of October, that fruit is going to be delicious in almost every way. Things that don't need adjustments, grapes that just taste great off the vine, usually make pretty good glasses of wine 3 years down the road.
So this is tough to say which is your favorite, but I mean, which are your wines? Which are your favorites?
Well, I make a wine called Zachary's Ladder after my son. So, as a father, you have to name a wine after your son. But that's almost always my go-to wine. Okay. It's Red Mountain, 100% French oak. Almost no new French oak though. It's a blend of Cab, Syrah, Petit Verdot. So it's kind of a field blend. It's very Red Mountain, and it's very classic to me. People argue terroir in Washington State, but I mean, these are grapes that grow next to each other. Right. Cab and Syrah. Sometimes, a lot of times in the review, they'll say, a strange blend of Cabernet and Syrah, but it's not strange. I mean, they grow truly next to each other. So, I mean, isn't that terroir? I mean, if Bordeaux could grow Syrah, they maybe would have. Right. But they can't. I mean, it's their climate, and I think they work well together on Red Mountain. And I think as kind of a blended wine goes really well. But that's one of my favorites that we do. I'm always, a fan of the Bully. The Bullies are 100% Cabernet or almost 100% Cabernet and done in new French oak. And it's really our kind of steakhouse wine. And it's a very generous Cabernet for Washington State. And, very unapologetic.
Well, speaking of being unapologetic, I think it's important. I mean, you got to own what you do, and you're getting noticed by some big names in the wine world, recognizing the wines that you're making. 90+ ratings in Wine Spectator, Wine Advocate, and what's that like as a winemaker that started, in his garage?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, it happened from the very beginning. I mean, our first reviews out of the gate were substantial, and it makes me smile a little bit because I think of how much we've changed in those 15, 16 years, and I think our craft is getting much better. The farmers most certainly are getting better in Washington State. Right. Our process is better. I think about how we made the wines, and maybe the little that we knew about, or I knew personally about Red Mountain and the tannin structure. And so we work really hard nowadays, just kind of taming a little bit of the tannin while you can still get all that delicious fruit. You still get the structure without getting kind of that edginess. I go back and try some of our O2s and O3s. They're still tannic, after 16 years. And, back in the day, I mean, I get it. They were showy, but you can't hide that tannin forever because that delicious fruit is going to eventually subside. It's got to. I think that's what's happened now. But I think our wines nowadays are more balanced, and I think they'll age more balanced. It's hard to predict what's going to happen to a wine once you've bottled it. But I do think that if it starts out relatively delicious and balanced, it's probably going to ride that course.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of great winemakers, there's a lot of great vineyards, and a lot of great folks that have a lot of passion in the industry. Who are you looking at right now as like, these folks are making some truly exceptional wines? Your peer group, I mean. Yeah,
boy, it's tough. Tough question after harvest because I haven't been out for a little while. I mean, I always I would say my buddies in the wine business, the Mark Ryans, the Sparkmans, the Darbys, Bear Winery. I mean, we're kind of a loose group called the Grape Killers, a loose marketing group. We do events every once in a while together, but we started out as kind of friends, and a lot of us moved into this exact complex at the same time, and it just so happened that, maybe just by association, we kind of upped everybody's game, and we were kind of almost like a third wave in Woodinville for a while. I mean, because we all started around 2000, 2002. You have Chateau Michel starting in the 70s, and then you had just some of the foundation wineries in Woodinville, like DeLille and Betts, start kind of after that. And then we were like this small little wave. There wasn't a lot of wineries in Woodinville, a lot of 30-somethings, who maybe didn't know their way around a winery, just decided to open up a winery, and we did. And I do think we kind of upped each other's game and kind of helped each other out. It was very communal back then. Now I can't say that I really know all my neighbors now, but I wish them all the best, and there's still a lot of trading and borrowing and using each other's equipment, so it might change when we get to Maltby.
That's true.
So no one's going to be able to find us.
Well, I'm sure they will. Yeah. So if you had to give a personality to your wine, a few attributes that would let people kind of get a feel through your words, what would that be?
Well, I mean, excuse me, on the red side, I mean, we were definitely in pursuit of concentration. We've always been seen as probably one of the leaders and kind of the pioneers in making extraction in wines, which is not always, it's not a trend right now. Sometimes the trend, in the kind of the small age-driven world where, lighter, brighter, more acidic, lower alcohols, which you can't always control in Washington State, and I think that's what makes it a very tough kind of prize to grab in Washington. And I do like those wines, but I don't think that is what we do. I embrace the fact that, we're making wine that comes from a desert, and it's ripe, it's delicious. I'm not trying to tame that. I want it to be ripe and delicious, and I don't mind fruit in my wine. It's made out of fruit, and the concentration is there off of Red Mountain. So, I mean, these are things that I definitely don't try to restrain in the wines, and I want it to be delicious. And ultimately, that's what we're doing. I've never felt that I had to pair with food necessarily, but it does pair with food, like. My argument is that, why do I have to be, an accompaniment to a meal? I would like to be a course. I want to be part of it. I want to be part of the kind of enjoyment of a meal where, the wine is every bit as good as your foie gras and steak.
I love that. So we're coming up on December.
Yeah.
We were just back in your cellar, and you've just transferred some pink wine.
Yeah, your son did.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little happy about that. I do love a good rosé wine.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
There's a release date coming up, so we might as well tell people about that because this will be blasting off about that same time.
Well, so this will be the earliest we've ever bottled rosé. We've bottled early January, February traditionally. But we feel we have our act together this year, and we could probably bottle first week of December.
Nice.
Which, there's no reason to keep it in a tank. I mean, tank's just a big bottle, in my opinion. So we'll bottle about 700 cases first week of December, and we are famous for running the first few cases down to the tasting room. So I imagine first week of December, maybe right before Pearl Harbor Day, we'll be selling some 2018 rosé. We've never sold a wine made that year. During that year.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's almost like a nouveau rosé.
Yeah.
But it should be good. It's tasting delicious. It's one of the, thanks to your son, his goal, we made his goal this year was, since our rosé is a Signé, so it's a pooled portion, we bleed out a little bit of every ton of red grapes we get in. So, but to make a good Signé, you got to pull it really quickly before it picks up color, especially with Red Mountain fruit. This stuff wants to pick up color almost immediately. So, his job was right after we're pressing it, he had to, after we were stemming it and crushing it, he was grabbing Signé within 10 minutes sometimes and getting it in the tank. So it's a beautiful kind of light salmon pink, and it's bright, delicious, fresh. Be bottled 2 months after it was grapes, so I think it'll be kind of cool.
That's really cool. So that people will be able to find that pretty initially.
I think so. If we follow our MO for the last few years, it will be available before Christmas.
So we have the warehouse district, but it'll probably be in the
station or the Hollywood district.
Hollywood district.
So we're right there in the middle of the roundabouts.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that would be good for folks to know?
I don't know. I think, keep an eye on us in Maltby. I'm unsure what that facility will be outside of an obvious production facility for us. So we're moving into a facility twice as large that we're in now and in one room, opposed to, we're in several small rooms right now. So the ease of making wine is really going to be the benefit for me after, 15 years here. But, we're going to do events out there. We took on extra space so we could have events, so we can bring in our club members. We have a hard time in this facility, of course, inviting all of our 700 club members into a 2,000 square foot building. It's a little tight, but I think we're going to be a more festive winery next year. I think we're going to enjoy our space a little bit more. We most certainly will enjoy making wine in that much space indoors. In shorts, who knows? I mean, it should be easier.
And you're thinking, when will you be brother?
We'll be moving sometime in February of 2019. I can't imagine us being open our doors till maybe mid-19, but when we do, it will be big.
That'd be awesome. Chris Gorman, thank you so much for talking with us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Chris Gorman is the owner and winemaker of Gorman Winery, a super premium winery located in Woodinville, Washington. Want to know more about Gorman Winery? Check out their website, gormanwinery.com. I'll post links to their website and contact information on my theoryofwine.com blog. Hey wine friends, each week the Theory of Wine will bring you interesting content from winemakers, wine growers, wine rebels, writers and bloggers, and serious wine nerds from around the world. Want to join us? Connect with us at theoryofwine.com, on Facebook, or Twitter. Cheers, friends. My guest, Leenn Frose, is the lady boss at Town Hall Brands, a marketing agency based in Vancouver BC which specializes in food, drink, hospitality, and culture. She has worked to market and publicize companies from all over the world for more than 2 decades. And last year, she established Vineyard Birder as a blog to share her personal experiences or musings that don't have a place in her work at townhallbrands.com. We are in Walla Walla, Washington. I'm with Leenn Frose of the VineyardBirder.com. We're at the Wine Bloggers Conference. I'm not sure which edition this is. 11th year?
I think it's 11th, yeah.
So we are in the hotel lobby, so it may be a little loud if you're listening to the show. What I'd like to do is just kind of ease us into this and tell us a little bit about yourself and talk about your blog.
Sure. So I've been working in wine since 1997, so that makes this 21 years for me. And what I've always done is listen to other people's stories and help their stories get told. Never had an avenue to really get personal and tell my own. And after attending this conference to interact and learn from bloggers for many years, last year I was finally inspired to start my own. I love birds. I love wine. My perfect intersection is if I can see birds in vineyards. Therefore, I'm Vineyard Birder.
Nice. I like it. So I haven't been to your website yet, and I will, but you're from Vancouver, BC.
Yeah.
And tell us about those wine regions in your part of the world.
Well, British Columbia has a few different wine regions. Vancouver is what people know the most because it's our coastal city. But what a lot of people don't know is that within an hour or two from Vancouver, there are wine regions. The Vancouver Island and the Wine Gulf Islands, there's vineyards and wineries there. You go the other way, you start heading east into the Fraser Valley, there's wineries there. And then if you go over the mountains and into the interior, then you're in the most well-known regions, which are the Okanagan and Similkameen. And then if you go further north, there's what they're calling emerging areas. They're working on the AVAs for those right now. You go into the Thompson Valley around Kamloops. Beautiful wine region there too.
Awesome. So tell us about the type of grapes that are grown in this part of the world.
Vitis vinifera. So, depending on the regional part of British Columbia, the coastal regions don't get the same amount of heat degree days. So you will find that it's more early ripening grapes. Some of these wineries will augment their supply from wines from the interior that they can ripen up the reds and add to their portfolio. But Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir,
Nice.
Cab, Merlot, everything that's quite popular globally.
So on your VineyardBirder.com website, what kind of things do you talk about?
Mostly myself and what I'm doing and my own experiences. I found that it was a place for me to get personal if I want to, and to share things that are not about my clients, because I do work with so many wine clients, and I love people, I love wine, and I want to just be able to talk and evangelize about it regardless. And I thought that it would be a great place for me to dump my experiences that are not strictly work-related.
So you have a business, Town Hall Brands. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we're a marketing agency, full service, located in Vancouver, but we serve clients all over the world. And we have 4 key competencies: strategy, graphic design, events, and then the PR social media piece. We don't do wineries and wine regions exclusively, but I would say that's probably 75 to 80% of our business. Yeah.
So we're at the Wine Bloggers Conference. What do you think about this event, and what are you getting from the experience?
Well, it's really interesting. My first time was in 2012, and after attending once, I was hooked, and I've made it to every conference since. I have to tip my hat to Zephyr conferences because, I've been to a lot of different corporate conferences and a lot of different travel conferences and things like this due to my work. And I have to say that theirs is one of the best organized, best run. I really have to give a hat tip to them. So the fact that I know I'm going to have a well-run program with quality content does keep me coming back. My motivation to come originally is that in doing media relations and with the changing media landscape, I felt it was my job to understand bloggers and what their motivation is, and to see if there's actually a good way for us to work together. That was what originally started it. And then, of course, you make friends, and then you just want to return to have those experiences with these friends.
So I'm curious, what is your experience working now, talking with bloggers about how would you kind of connect wineries with bloggers, or would you? I mean, what's your thought on that?
Well, when I put on my PR hat, I have a job to do, and I treat all of my exchanges with bloggers as a professional exchange. And bloggers, for me, they offer one outlet, one channel, one voice, just the same as I would talk to someone on radio, talk to somebody on television, talk to print legacy journalists. Bloggers have, to me, represent a great opportunity for clients to have someone tell their story in the same way. It's another channel, which I think they need to take seriously.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's very interesting. So the podcast is designed to talk to folks from around the world, and people that are interested like us, that are maybe bloggers, that are maybe professional wine industry insiders. People just want to know more about wine. So how can people follow you on social media, and tell us what different ways can we reach you?
Oh my God, I'm so findable. I'm part of the international wine lover community, so I can be found through #WineLover if you dig through some of that. I'm most well known as Leenn Wine, LEEANNWINE, and that's where you can find all of my social. But Vineyard Birder, my new blog, I also have all the social channels there, so it's just @Vineyard Birder. But you Google my name, I'm very findable.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you for being one of my first guests on the show.
Oh, it's so exciting, Brad. I'm so excited for you. I think this is going to be great.
Thank you. Leenn Frose is a lady boss at Town Hall Brands, a marketing agency based in Vancouver, BC, which specializes in food, drink, hospitality, and culture. Want to know more about Leann's blog? Check out vineyardbirder.com and her professional work at townhallbrands.com. I'll post links to her website and contact information on my theoryofwine.com blog. Hey wine friends, thanks for hanging out with us for Theory of Wine podcast, brought to you by a new wine documentary called Wine Diamonds, Uncorking America's Heartland, now available online at winediamondsfilm.com and wineryboost.com, influence marketing for the wine industry. Thanks for listening, downloading, and sharing us. Find us at theoryofwine.com. See you next time. Cheers, friends.